growing to help build their teams with various products and services, and we like to think we do things a little bit differently. So I'll leave it at that. If you want to find out more about us, hit us up on LinkedIn and we can carry on the conversation from there. Raj, you have a little presentation just to give us people an overview of what we're going to be doing. If you can,
I will do.
That'd be great. Up to Raj.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a bit of a context around the masterclass that we're holding today. Obviously, it's all about remote onboarding. Mike and Dave have introduced themselves. They're both our practice leads here at AmSource, and they'll be running through everything with our panel today, effectively our hosts. This was our first webinar that we were in. So this was the first part of the webinar. We held it on the 10th of June. It's on YouTube now. It's fully available. It was an interactive session, and we actually created a report around the entire issue of remote working. If you remember when we were quarantined and locked down, we might well be again at some point. It was a real hot button issue, not just in tech, but in lots of different sectors. And it was a really interesting discussion that we had where we'd surveyed the tech industry and got a lot of interesting original facts and figures around. And out of that discussion, we realized that remote onboarding was a really hot button issue, because tech businesses were still wanting to grow. They were still wanting to let people join their companies, but weren't entirely sure of how to do it without the office environment as they usually would, which is where this session's been born from today. When we send across anything after the webinar, we'll send you links to the YouTube video for that first session if you weren't there, and the download link for the report as well. But that was a really good session. And that was the reason why we've got this panel we've put together today. So Irena Yeung from Solarisbank in Berlin. The credentials are there on screen that you can run through yourself. I'll make the assumption that you can read for you. It's not bedtime stories. Anjo Gaul here as well as a community manager, formerly at Test.io. We've also got Alasdair Thompson from BAE Systems in the UK, and Matjaz from Spark Networks in Berlin as well. So incredibly decorated panel who fully experts in this field, and you'll be hearing more from them as we go forward. One thing that we did ask you when you signed up for your tickets is how many have been remote onboarding, and this is the split. So 67% of you that have signed up, and that was a large number, have already been doing this practice. Only 33% haven't. So that shows you just where the industry is heading and where the sector's heading with this in mind. These are the topics that we're going to be covering as well. So the do's and don'ts of remote onboarding, the tools and technologies behind it, the advantages and improvements that we might have perhaps experienced as a part of remote onboarding, what a typical first day looks like for a new recruit in the tech industry with remote onboarding, what challenges you faced, graduate hires, how that might affect the business, and how do you build rapport. And then right at the end, we'll have a question and answer session as well. And this is the third part of our series on remote working, will be the remote culture and collaboration. Sorry, did I drop out there for a second?
Yes. Yeah, you're back now, Raj.
Shall I go back? Sorry, these are all the topics we're covering in case you missed any of these. So what challenges, graduate hires, building rapport, and a Q&A session. And then I did say it was the second part of a three-part series. So the third part will be working with Mural, and that'll be on the 10th of September. That'll be again 5 o'clock GMT on Zoom, our British Standard Time if you'd rather. It'll be hosted with Mural, and it'll be around remote culture and collaboration. So it'll sort of neatly tie off the three-pronged attack we've had around remote working, and the details are there, and we'll be sharing those with you later and how to sign up as well. But that's it from me. If Mike and Dave want to take away with the panel now and get going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Raj. So yeah, we'll introduce the panel. We've got Irena from Solarisbank, Anjo, Community Manager, Alasdair from BAE, and Matjaz from Spark. Irena, if you want to introduce yourself and give people a bit of a background as to what your credentials are. I'll leave it to you.
Sure, thank you, Mike. So hello, everyone. My name is Irena from Solarisbank. So I have worked in people and organization team for more than 2 years already. We grow really fast. I have on board over 300 people so far in these 2 years, which is quite a lot. For some of you, maybe you don't know about Solarisbank. I will give you just a little background of our company. So we are the first banking as service platform with a full banking license that enables companies to offer their own financial products. So for my role, I mainly take care of the onboarding for the new joiners, especially for those who are new in Germany. For example, they don't know how to do the registration, how to get the tax ID. Look for flats in Berlin could be a big challenge for them. So from middle of March, we start 100% remote onboarding because of COVID-19 situation. I have encountered lots of problems at the beginning. Was not easy at all for me. For more details, we will discuss later, and I could share my experience from HR perspective. So that's about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Irena. Anjo?
Yeah, hello, I'm Anjo. This is my daughter, Amy, and for our sakes, I will not send her out. She's just checking if I'm working. I think my most relevant experience is from Test.io, where I built a team of about 30 people, all fully remote, all completely distributed around the world. And I'm happy to share those experiences with you. Just to give you a little background about why it's all remote, Test.io is basically QA, but working in the crowd. So all our testers were remote, and so were our test team leads, the test consultants, and support team, and so on. But happy to share more later.
Thanks. Alasdair?
Hi there, it's Alasdair Thompson. So BAE Applied Intelligence, as well as building exciting things like aeroplanes and warships, we build client-facing bespoke software engineering products, mostly in government, but some financial services, etc. as well. So yeah, my role is to run the Leeds office. We've got about 200, 250 software engineering type staff there, but we work really closely with people from all around the country, the southeast, and then Poland, KL in Malaysia. So we're quite used to kind of remotely having teams spread across multiple areas, etc. But obviously it isn't normal to be recruiting people and onboarding them remotely, so that has been new.
Cool. Thanks. Last but not least, Matjaz.
So my name is Matjaz. I work at Spark Networks. So traditionally, we've been a company that's been kind of acquiring companies from elsewhere and then moving everything over to Berlin. So we were always very used to having a home base, and everything was even like comparing to not just onboarding, but also recruiting. Everything was done pretty much on site. So we had to turn around very quickly after this change. And actually change things quite a lot, especially in the actual recruiting side, but also onboarding everybody in a very different way. So it was a very big challenge, to say at least. We onboarded about 5 new developers with different levels of issues there, especially with some being in India and having problems delivering stuff to them. So maybe we can go a bit deeper into that later.
Brilliant. So we're going to start things off with our first topic. It's loosely around everybody's experience of remote onboarding. Have you done it in the traditional sense before COVID, and how the process has differed when adopting fully remote? And I suppose with Anjo, it was always remote, so it'd be interesting to get that perspective. So, Irena, if you could kick us off and over to the panel.
Yeah, sure. So from my experience of the remote onboarding, at the beginning, I was worried about how to do it 100% remotely, because it was quite short notice because of the COVID-19 situation, and more, and I'm getting more.
See that not as a new normal, but as a way of communicating with people. And I think once you're used to talk online to people, that really helps you to also onboard them, because you are more confident. And if you are more confident, they will feel it, and they will become, in my opinion, also more confident to do this whole process online. And well, not face-to-face in video calls and maybe even in emails sometimes, because I don't believe that you need to do everything in a call. There's a lot of things that you can just, I mean, if you would, or at least if I would onboard somebody not remotely, I would give them like, well, written things, and this can also be sent out as emails, I guess. Yeah, and that's basically what I think helped me the most experience-wise with remote onboarding. But I cannot really compare it to like traditional onboarding, since I only done that with like 1 or 2 people in my career so far.
Yeah. Obviously, you've done plenty of the traditional hiring.
So I'll compare. I'll do the opposite. I will compare it. So what we used to do is a pretty standard corporate thing. We'd pull everyone down to our head office in Guildford, and they'd spend 2 days. I don't know, a first day of a succession of people telling them about the company, the usual stuff, how they fit into the world, followed by a dinner for all the new starters that fortnight, plus the managers and stuff, which was quite nice. And then the second day would be more sort of practical things like security and IT, and you'd get your laptop and all that stuff. Then you toddle off back home and have a laptop and a badge, etc. And on day 3, you'd start in either your real office or down at a client site, etc. So I guess we then hit a point where that wasn't really going to work. Now, to be honest, I think most people did shrink their recruitment at the same time. So we have continued to hire, continued to onboard, but not in the volumes that we might have done in the past. But what we tried to do is just shrink the whole thing into A, smaller, and B, a remote piece. So instead of 2 days of lots of people talking at you, you would have probably just a 2-hour session with the sort of condensed version of the really important stuff you need to know. And then you might have a one-to-one session with the IT guy who explain how to use your laptop, and that would have been shipped to you the day before, etc. Always mandatory training, health and safety. Go and spend an hour doing health and safety training about an office that you've never actually been to, but you need to tick that box. So there's all that great fun stuff, and then I guess what happened is that evolved, because I mean, to us, our office has stayed open, all the way through the duration. And the first couple of months of lockdown, it was probably 5 or 10 people at any one time keeping the lights on. But now I've probably got 15% of staff there at any one time. So it's a lot easier. So what we do now is we cheat a bit on the remote onboarding by not doing it remotely. So we still don't do any of the big stuff going down south, etc. But we do pull people into the office in Leeds, and then they would meet with their new manager and a couple of guys from the team, etc. And they can a few people, and you've seen some faces, and it's easier to push things together. So it's almost like a hybrid best of both worlds scenario, I guess.
And Matjaz, what's your experience been so far?
I have to say that it's very similar to Alasdair in some ways, because we also had like a 2-day onboarding beforehand that was on site with a very similar agenda, in all honesty. But we went for lunch instead of dinner, so that's the major difference there. And then when possible, I mean, we still have some people who are getting onboarded remotely because specifically they don't have the opportunity to move around or come here yet, or they're going to be part of the onboarding later. The biggest issue though we've had was with some specific cases, like a colleague starting in India, having all the papers, basically starting work in Germany officially, but not being able to move over. And we had incredible issues getting a laptop to our new colleague. So like the actual shipping becomes a huge topic, especially when we're talking about shipping to a different continent altogether. So yeah, that was our biggest pain point.
Great. So yeah, so that's obviously a further introduction and your experiences. But I think some of you have kind of, like Anjo has been there and done that, as in that's what he's majorly done, and then some people have had to adapt. So from those experiences, what would you say are the do's and don'ts of remote onboarding, and what have you found that works well, and what have you found that does not work so well? So Anjo, do you want to kick us off with that?
Of course. So I think what worked well for me is that I kind of, in a way, I almost combined the hiring process with the onboarding already. So what I did, for example, is in the hiring process, I already got several people from the team to talk to this new guy or to soon to be new guy, obviously not like super early, but when it was pretty clear that this is probably a guy we want to hire, then I introduced like a buddy that showed him how we would work and so on, and I got some questions so they get to know the team little by little and not being like dumped in a virtual room with a bunch of new people on a screen. And I think that worked really well because once then they meet everybody, they already had people that they knew or well knew remotely, and it was easier for them, at least that was the feeling and the feedback I got, it was easier for them to start the conversation. They already been basically part of a little team that then expanded into these are all the new guys now. And I think what is really important, it's not only for onboarding, but it's for me it's a big don't, is when you have at least one person remote, and also if it is only one person remote, then you need to switch to communicate fully remote, because what happens if you don't is that you have the people around you who get like all the infos, and you have the people who are remote who only get half of the infos, because you talk to the people in the same room, and then well, everybody knows except for the remote people. And so a big don't is, if you have at least one person remote, don't communicate as you used to. Really switch to fully remote. So it's more like a do, but also the don't is really important here, is be fully remote if you have people remote, at least in communication. You can have people in the same room and you can of course talk to those people, but if something really important comes up, make sure the team knows, not only the people who are not remote.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's all about the personal connections, isn't it? So as you say, if you've got 9 people sat in a room and someone else 100 miles away, then you have to think about that.
Yes.
But I think if you just imagine when you started your new job and you turn up and you're in the office and you're kind of feeling yourself around, and someone shows you where the kitchen is, where the loo is and stuff, and you get a feel, you might bump into a couple of people, you get introduced, have a chat. So you start to kind of build an idea of what you got yourself into, what the sort of people you are going to be working like. Are they people you like? Have you made a big mistake? All these things that you just don't get at home, right? So it's how do you break down those barriers, and how do you give people that opportunity to build into the team? One of the, you'll remember at the early days of lockdown, everyone went Zoom quiz crazy. So there was lots of these kind of virtual coffee breaks, and let's all sit around in front of our computer screens and drink beer, kind of in front of each other type thing. So and those things are all kind of useful when you got new people in. So we definitely made a point. I guess this isn't just about onboarding really. This is about everything. But we made a point of encouraging people to have calls with their work colleagues that were nothing to do with work. So talking about work was banned. It's like there wasn't football to talk about, but you talk about something, talk about the fact there is no football, whatever. And I think that's a good thing, to give the opportunity for the new people to come into the team, etc., and get a feel for that kind of thing. Another really good idea, which I heard, and I've been meaning to do for about a month now, was I'm supposed to be going around my office with my phone and videoing it. So the guys that are there's a sandwich guy and they turn up at this time, and and this, and and you need to do this and don't do this, and all those little rules that you kind of pick up that you don't. So anything you can do around that, I think, is going to help. I think if you what not to do is don't forget about these people. Right? It sounds really stupid, but if you're sat in a room working and there's a new person who's joined and sat 3 desks away, you even though you're having a really busy day, you'll always make the effort to go and say, hi, how's it going? Do you need any help? Or let me introduce you to this person. So I think if you translate that to something virtual, the day distills into these set points of I've got this call here, and then we start off with a daily stand-up, and then we do this, and then there's a call here, and I've got a check-in point here. But in between, it's kind of like, well, I'm not really onboarded enough to do anything useful and interesting, and I've got some background reading, but what I really want to do is like crack open my screen and start typing some code into it, that kind of thing. So I think it's just to encourage people to be in there, and I think we'll talk about tooling later, but just having open Slack channels or something so you can continue just to communicate all through the day and don't forget about them is going to help you.
Cool. Yeah, nice one.
Rotating them to make the same thing happen that Alasdair was talking about, basically having them go through people and learning about more people from the company and creating this cultural connection, because it's so important for us to actually have that. The other thing that I found works really well is to have basically either their manager or additionally also the manager of their manager check in with them on a fairly regular basis, like every 2 weeks or so on, making sure that you don't lose the people. You know that they still know that you're thinking about them. They know how things are. Like I even had like a conversation with another person that ended up thinking, not in our company, but in another company, ended up thinking that they'd been fired because like the day that they were supposed to be onboarded, they got information about it like at 11, 12, right? So it's also very important not to, to have sure, information for people when you're getting onboarded, so that people are not like, what the hell is going on? Oh my God, I'm like having a panic attack. These are really important things. What we found that doesn't work is people don't do like things naturally anymore. Like they don't bump into each other. Of course not, because they're not in the same office. We used to have Friday beers in the office. Of course, this doesn't work, right? Because nobody can get there. And even now that we're returning to the office, we still can't have that. And for what it looks like, we're not going to have it ever. So we're looking into actually how to resolve that in the long run. But it's a really big issue that's been happening. We've tried to do it online, and that didn't work. It just doesn't happen. Like you can try to get 40, 50 people into it. It happened the first time, the second time, and then after that, the novelty wore off and it just doesn't work anymore. So this is like maybe one of like a problem that you have, where how do you get people to socialize more? You're gonna have 5 conversations going at the same time, which are gonna be natural. Here you can't really do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Irena, finally.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Matjaz. It's easy for the new joiners to feel isolated, especially to do the remote onboarding. We have less interaction and distant gap in between. Beginning, I encourage our new joiners, feel free to ask any questions if they have, no matter related to work. If they are new in Germany, we are feel free to have a coffee together. And I prefer I'm not the only one who just talk, but also I encourage them to have discussion with me in between in the onboarding. Also, being sense of humor is a key for me. When I see some of them start being not so focused on the first day, then I will tell one bad joke, share with them in order to wake them up. To help them become familiar with everyone while getting comfortable and talking to each other. I think this is really important for the beginning. What we should not do, I would say, especially at the beginning or on the first day, don't put too much information, because they need time to digest, because they are all new. They meet a lot of new people. They need to remember new names, new information. So I think we should take it slowly and ask them for feedback. How do they feel? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? To adjust the onboarding speed. And it's always good to have a follow-up meeting with them rather putting.
What are the nuances of different toolings and things like that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think this really depends on how you operated previously. So I don't think we've introduced any new tooling. We've just thought about how we use it and used it more effectively. as I say, it could be quite common previously for me to have a team where there was 5 people in Leeds, 2 over the other side of the world, a couple down in London, whatever. So that whole kind of remote communication as part of your day-to-day project, going through the sprint ceremonies, etc., was pretty standard. So things in there like, I mean, we use WebEx rather than Zoom, but they're all the same. Using Slack and just having those channels open all the time, using messaging and all that sort of stuff. They're kind of basic tools, right? And they all work the same, and they have some pros and cons, but essentially they're all the same. So it's just how you use it and how you use that effectively. We've experimented with some whiteboarding, sort of remote programs, how you use that effectively. There's no necessary reason to reinvent the wheel, and that's the whole burden of introducing a new tool, both financial and learning curves, etc. So only do that if you really need to.
Yeah. Matjaz, we were talking, weren't we, and you were saying how you've taken COVID-19 lockdown as an opportunity to embrace pair programming and the trials and tribulations of screen sharing. What are your thoughts on these tools?
So we used Teams before as a communication tool, and we didn't really like it, and we still don't like it, but it works. So it doesn't really matter. We just found a way to use it, which is we ended up we really have a big focus on pairing within our company nowadays. So we want to do that more and more, and people do it more and more. And it's interesting how in the end, COVID has actually helped us promote that within the teams rather than the other way around, because people didn't have enough contact with each other before because of COVID, and they felt more comfortable actually doing work with somebody else, because it did mean you're in contact with somebody. Generally, it's just a Microsoft Teams call or a Zoom call, and then sharing the screen and switching who shares it and switching the code there, which means that basically the tool set is the same. It's just, again, I feel like I'm just parroting Alasdair, but it is how you use them. It's finding a better use for it, or using it in a better way than before. Other tools that we included, there are none. Whatever we had before, we've been using now, and it's not really that different, except for learning how to use it more powerfully.
Yeah.
The only thing I wish we had better everywhere was internet connections.
Really, I suppose your role in onboarding people is different to, say, Alasdair and Matjaz as technical line managers, but what tools do you use, and what role do they play bringing people into Solarisbank?
So we mostly use Zoom call to communicate to each other. For example, the onboarding, we use Zoom most of the time. I found it's really helpful because it's easy to share the message and share our screen. Also, one thing I want to mention is we use Confluence. Not sure if your guy heard about that. So it's like an intranet for our company internally. We share all the information there. For example, our updates, benefits, company vision, processes. Currently, the most popular topic is COVID-19 Q&A. So when people, they have questions, it's kind of our company Bible. They can search most of the information there. So we try to put as much information there so that people can find the answer by themselves anytime. So I think that would really helpful for us to share the information.
Yeah, I was wondering what people are doing to keep the lines of communication open, a little bit like what Anjo was mentioning earlier. If you've got just one person on the run and they don't have access to everything, or like before we even started, Anjo was a bit confused with the document that we'd shared to coordinate all this. How do you make sure everyone has the same thing at the same time? So you're using Confluence.
Yeah, so we basically did something really similar. We did not use Confluence, but we used the Google Suite, and we had like a handbook for every employee. And whenever we updated this, we posted an announcement about it, obviously. And yeah, I can just second all the other people, because it's really not about which tools you use, it's just how you use them, and make sure to use them in a way that it works for you. get better at using them. I don't want to repeat all that, but I can give you a few examples of what we did. For example, we had like the Slack channel where everybody could like ask questions, like general stuff like you would do. But we also had an announcement channel where only announcement would be posted. Like, for example, hey, we had this update for this handbook about this and that topic, and nobody was allowed to post there, only in threads. So you could then, if you have a question about it or a comment about it, you could open the thread and write into this. But the channel itself stayed really clean with just all the announcements that we made with the changes. For example, if somebody, let's say, is on vacation for 2 weeks and there have been a few announcements, he just needs to go into the channel, read all the new messages, and then he had a link to the news, or the news was already there. And then one thing, it's a bit like from earlier, but I want to touch on again, is it's really important to have this chit chat more or less between people. And since you don't meet people in the 10 minutes, I actually planned that in to have like the chit chat, a bit of a moderated chit chat, but we did that. And yeah, it was more or less me asking, normally starting by me asking like, hey Marcus, how was your, I don't know, how you told me you want to go to the cinema. What, did you see the movie? How was it? And then we talked a bit about the movie, and then it's like, who has seen it as well? And then people are like, yeah, I've seen it. I think it's great. Others were like, I disagree. And then you had a conversation starter basically. And then people joined in and they did the stuff that you would normally do when you meet somebody in the kitchen or while you're playing football or something like that. And if you know that you need that and you plan it in the beginning for like 10 minutes of an official meeting, I think it's totally okay, because it's not time. First off, it's not time wasted. And second, if you know you talk 10 minutes about a totally random topic, you just do the meeting 10 minutes longer. Instead of 45 minutes, you do an hour, or instead of 30 minutes, you do 45 minutes. And I think that helps a lot to get the team together on a personal level. And yeah, otherwise, sorry?
I was just going to say, in your team in particular, you know, it was distributed from, you know, it was following the sun, wasn't it? So you've got time differences to compete with as well. Like, how do you manage to keep a team when, you know, when one's awake, the other's asleep, and everything in between?
Yeah, that was in fact a bit tricky. So normally when we did the meetings, that was quite late for me, quite early for, now I need to rethink, but quite early for the US, and I think okay for Asia, but maybe I'm confusing time zones right now. But basically, you have to be flexible in terms of when you work, and that luckily worked well, because people, they were actually happy. They were waiting for those meetings. When we had like an all hands, sometimes people were like, okay, when's the next one? And I said, like, for example, 3 weeks. Oh, can we do it in 2 weeks? And I was like, yeah, if we have enough stuff to talk about, absolutely. And we also had a pretty open culture in terms of talking in Slack. So it was not like people would not be talking about personal things on Slack. And there was enough things where they could ask questions, the either more senior guys, or it was also pretty clear that even it doesn't really matter how junior you are in terms of time to spend in the team, you can always voice your opinion. And I think it's really, really important, especially in remote teams, that it is clear to everyone that they are allowed to speak. It doesn't really matter. There, first off, no stupid questions, and second off, there's nobody too junior to talk to everybody and give their opinion about things.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I think we've kind of touched on this through some of the topics, but it'd be good to have like a real clear idea of what a typical first day looks like when you've onboarded someone remotely. So I appreciate this will be different for everyone. And then we've also put in here as well, how do you ensure that candidates feel as welcome as they would with a face-to-face onboarding? So I think we've touched on that as well, but you know, just breaking that down. So Matjaz, do you want to break down the first day when you've onboarded people remotely specifically?
So generally nowadays, it's like, as I said, it's basically 6 hours altogether. I think it's like 3 sessions of about 2 hours where they get general information about the company, just the general, you know, corporate stuff with information about where's this, where's that, who do you call if something's wrong, like how do you contact HR, where do you put the information that you're sick, just the generic everyday things that happen, some information about the actual company. And then when that day is done, the actual first day to me is the day that comes after, when they actually first start working, which would generally mean that they already received their laptop and have access to most of the tools. For us, a big issue that we currently still have is the onboarding for the actual tools and the accounts is still not perfect, but this is really something that's remained from before. We always had this problem even when we were onboarding people locally or at the office. So I wouldn't say it's a new issue, but what we do is for every tech member, we get them into the first basically daily meeting. They get introduced. We make sure that they know everybody who's on the call. We make sure that they introduce them, know that they can talk to people. Again, assign them a buddy. We try to rotate those buddies. And then like as they have somebody that they can refer to when they need something, it makes them feel better. Definitely one of the things that I would do differently in hindsight, though, is making sure that we have a way to deliver like actual.
What about your typical first day?
Yeah, so for our first day, usually it's separate in 2 sessions. In the morning, we do the company introduction, and then in the afternoon is the laptop setup. So make sure there are enough breaks in between so that they can get a nice coffee. So during the onboarding, usually at first we play the mini game in order to break the ice, because usually in the morning and they don't know each other, they are more like they don't want to talk a lot. And then we will give an introduction about the company background, what is our structure, products, culture, something like that. And then it comes to my favorite part. We do a group picture together, and then we have a tradition. I force my new joiners to make a weird pose or a funny face, and then we do a group picture together. And then I will post it in our company general Slack group to announce, hey, these are our new joiners. And then, yeah, just to have a happy start for everyone. And then in the afternoon, usually it's the laptop setup to make sure all the tools we need are installed and in place. And then after that, I connect the new joiners and the team lead and let them say hi to each other. And then the team lead introduce them to the team. That's what we do on the first day, not too much on the first day. And yeah, so how to make them feel welcome in the company, as I mentioned, we post a funny group picture in the Slack group. And also we have the biggest company get-together events. We announce our new joiners and introduce themselves there. If they like, they can also share the fun facts about themselves. So we got a lot of welcome message from other colleges to welcome all the new joiners, just to make them feel so warm. And the last thing, I think we don't just do the remote onboarding. We are also evaluating from different perspectives by doing survey how happy they are doing the remote working. I think the communication with the team lead, and we need to keep an eye on the team performance is also important. So for the long term, we need to measure the impact on employees' mental health as well. And also the productivity is also an important topic for us in the future. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so definitely some different tips on there that I like. That it does make people feel welcome, having the picture and stuff. That's really interesting. Anjo, what about yourself?
Well, I had the luxury of not onboarding several people at once, so it was relatively easy to make them at least feel welcome by just talking to individuals one-on-one. And that, as I said before, I introduced like their buddies in the recruiting process. Well, basically, you could even say the recruiting and onboarding went hand in hand. So basically, when I had like the official interviews with them, and then for me, it was a clear thing that I want to work with those people. The onboarding started, but they're, in a way, because the model was a bit different, not yet fully recruited. So the onboarding already started. We showed them the tools and we assigned the buddy, which was also the guy in the interviews then. So they got to know each other. They worked together on their like trainings and so on. And afterwards, basically we did the same. We introduced those people to like the larger group. They already knew some, as I said earlier, so it was easier for them to connect. And we also had like this little open chat round in those meetings as well. And sometimes we would not have an all hands when somebody new joined, because we would not do an all hands just for that. But then they got an intro in Slack, a proper intro. And also with time zones, sometimes somebody joined, like let's say in Germany in the morning, because he was from somewhere in Asia. So people in the States would not actually meet this person until they wake up. So that was a tricky one. But we then always, when we had hands-on, still introduced the newcomers, at least like officially in a way. And what I also like, I never did that with my team, but we did that with the company where we also had an office in the States and one in Germany. What I liked is we play 2 truths and a lie, because I'm not sure if you know the game, but basically you have to tell 2 truths and 1 lie about yourself, and the others need to guess what the lie is. And I really like that tradition. Even I never, I don't know why, but I never adopted it for the team itself. But that is great, because you tell 2 at least true personal things about yourself, and then 1 lie, and then people need to kind of analyze you and your character and what could be the lie, and does he really like cats, or is he afraid of parachuting? And that is, I think, also a great thing to get people, like, first off, to open up, and second, to be known, because even the people you have in your team already, they know each other, but they also don't know the new person. They might have the same boundaries as the new person. So I really like that, and I would do it in the future.
Yeah, cool. And Alasdair, final?
Yeah, so I think I went through the day earlier, which was bad planning of me, wasn't it? But if I focus on the second part of the question, which is making people welcome, so I think it's interesting, because you kind of got concentric circles of the people you interact with in a company that become much more introductions in the first couple of days. Then you plonk them into a team. That might be a team of 10. There might be another sort of increase to 15 of the people they actually interact with on a day-to-day basis. So the first thing is, well, they need to feel at home with that team. They need to know that there's someone there to ask questions. They need to know that that they've got the support they need, and if they have problems with technical things, obviously everything's been run over VPN, and those sometimes don't work properly. So you need that help. So I think that's a big part of it. I think one of the guys mentioned earlier, just picking up the phone and saying, hi, how are you doing? So I think if I'm in normal circumstances and I see a face I don't recognize, it's like, oh yeah, you must be Bob that joined last week, so I'll just go and introduce myself, say hi. You can't really do that when you're all at home. And also then it's kind of like a bit weird, because then suddenly, like, your boss's boss is picking up the phone and saying, hi, how are you doing? Sort of thing. So that can be a nice thing, but also it can be quite intimidating for, particularly for the new grads type thing. They might be, I might be scary and horrible. So you just have to think that through and work it out. But I think, a combination of that is there. Then I think it's important to understand that you could have joined 4 months ago and only ever spoken to 12 people. And you're vaguely aware there's another 180 odd people that you would be in an office with normally that you've never met. So we have a monthly kind of, used to be an all hands meeting where I got everyone into our biggest room and talk to them, and now I do that like this. And it's, I think Irena said earlier, it's kind of weird, because you're there talking to 200 people on a Zoom call and you've got no idea how they're responding. Are they bored off their face? Are they really angry if you said something really controversial and stuff? There's just zero feedback, so that's pretty difficult. But I think we always do a thing where we put their photos up and introduce them, etc. Because now it's like, here's a photo. You're never going to see this person for another 3 months, but if you do, this is what they would look like, kind of thing. So there's all things like that, and I think that all just comes together to just make people feel a little bit more, part of the team and welcome, etc.
Cool. Mike, I think over to you for the final topic, I think.
Yeah, there's one pain point that people have kind of spoken to us about when we're doing our day job of finding engineers and what have you. And how do you get more junior people on board? Because it's such a challenge getting experienced people up to speed and integrated into the team. What happens when you hire a graduate or someone with very little experience, and you've not only got to get them up to speed in your business and how you work, you've actually got to teach them how to do the job? Has anybody become that yet? Has anybody acknowledged that that is going to be a challenge, and have any plans how to tackle that?
We've had two actually juniors join us remotely. I mean, one of them, she's a junior in the new field, like as a front-end software developer, but she's an experienced worker from before. She used to be in product or like in procurement and worked with like a lot of responsibility. So like from a standpoint of somebody who's had experience working, I don't think she's that much of a difference than usual, right? But we have a graduate and he's started, and I think the actual remote pairing and stuff like that really helped the onboarding a lot. And basically we also do the same thing with like the remote setup where we call in from two sides, and our IT ops helps with the actual setup of the machine if anything else needs to be set up, and so on and so forth. So it hasn't been really that much of a challenge from what I've talked to people with. I mean, I wasn't directly part of the onboarding, but my reports and others have told me that it wasn't really that much of an issue, as long as you keep up and make sure that they have somebody to refer to all the time. Again, it's the same thing that you would have in an office, except you have to be much more, precise with it. Much more, you can't lose it. You have to be there. Because if it happens with remote, it's going to be much worse than just losing it on site, because on site you...
So, we've had people that were started in February or so on a 3-month, 4-month education program. And then after they finish that, they come to the office and start their projects, etc. But about halfway through the education program, lockdown happened. So they did the latter half of that remotely. So that was a bit of a culture shock to them. And then instead of doing the whole kind, we're transitioning from the school bit to the work bit, suddenly that was all remote. So that was kind of difficult. But I guess we had met them and we had spoken to them. They did have their kit and all that logistic stuff sorted. So we got them on the projects, and similar to that, we just hooked them up with a buddy, and they did pair programming, or they're more kind of platform engineering types, but pair working if you like. And generally it's been okay, but there's just there's the boring stuff you forget. So like the concept of on a Friday you fill in a timesheet and say what you've been doing. It took a while for that to kind of sink in as to something that's what they had to do, and you kind of think, oh, we're explaining it to them, but they're not sat next to someone else that's doing it and showing them how it works in SAP and all these other things. So that was difficult. And then we had another one who was a lady by herself that I felt really sorry for, because we hired her normally and she turned up and she did all the induction normally before lockdown, but the week before lockdown. So she kind of got to about Thursday and it's like, yeah, something strange is going on here, guys. Then obviously on Sunday, Boris says, right, shut the office. And so she'd met a team and she'd got a laptop and that sort of stuff. Then on Monday afternoon, the kind of customer director who she was going to work for, the economy's going to go horribly wrong. We just want to, can that project kind of thing. So it's like, okay, so you don't really have anyone to help you. You don't really know what you're doing, and that project we told you were going to go on to has now been cancelled, and we don't really have another one for you, sort of thing. So that was all this like kind of perfect storm of challenges.
You guys really needed to look out to do it, but they just followed it had a different opinion of a few things, and it was, at least in one case, it was really hard. And because first off, you need to find out what was going wrong, because you couldn't see something isn't working, but you couldn't really tell what it was until we figured out, okay, he's just working or used to a different way of working, work style. And that was also quite hard then to, change that remotely. It took a lot of effort.
So I think for when we hire a graduate or junior position, For sure, maybe they need more guidance at the beginning. So I have some suggestion, especially for the leadership. So I think all the processes should be documented. People can easily find the process or information maybe on the internet, Confluence, or just a Word documents. And also onboarding buddy program, it's a good idea. So you guys already mentioned, and schedule a regular one-on-one meeting with the new joiners is also important. Listen and provide feedback, and make sure there is two-way communication. And maybe you can also create a custom onboarding plan to guide them for the first few months. I think that would help for the beginning.
I absolutely agree. But one thing I would like to add is if you have a buddy, also talk with the buddy in one-on-ones to make a three-way conversation, because there will be a lot of insight.
Brilliant, excellent. Okay, well, thanks for all of that. I think we're going to hand over to Raj. I think he might have a couple of questions from some people who have joined us, and yeah, Raj.
Hi there,
everyone.
We've just had a couple of questions sent through on the chat. I'd asked everyone who's been attending if they wanted to send anything through, and we've had one from Nat Blundell, who said, once COVID is over and we have the option of going back to face-to-face, will the panel keep any of the remote onboarding processes going?
I'll repeat that one, Raj. I think your Wi-Fi is letting you
Yeah,
down.
Raj, we'll take over the questions, mate.
Yeah. So what Raj was trying to say, Nat has asked, once COVID is over, and you have the option to revert back to fully face-to-face, will you, will you keep any part of this process? And actually, that ties in with a question from Les, asking, the money. In particular, Matjaz, you've been able to shrink the process right down and improve it. Are these things here to stay? Are people going to revert back to type as soon as they can?
From our side, we want to keep every improvement that we had still there, right? Like we believe that even though we might be looking at COVID going away, I don't think our remote onboarding will be going away completely. Because there's the other option of also, letting people have some more time before they relocate, giving them the possibility to actually, plan their relocation better and so on. And it's just more like nicer for the person joining in that regard. Plus the other thing is we're actually looking at having a much less strict work from home policy, which also might imply us having remote onboardings, even with people that could come into the office, which it looks like it's going to be a reality. And Fridays are going to be home office days, apparently, forever. So there's that, right? So there's a fair amount of things that we've also learned for this, like the buddy system becoming a bigger thing. It did come in the end from the COVID issue, but we're not going to let that go. Those are really good practices in general, and we should have been doing them beforehand. So not going to let go of that.
I think just on that point, as we start to wrap up, what we want to do with all the conversation we've had today is maybe put together a bit of a blueprint for what good looks like, some of the key things that we need to think about when people are remote onboarding. I think the main thing is communication. That seems to be the big key thing here. Raj, do you want to add the final slide, and we'll kind of just wrap things up, and if anyone's got any final points, feel free to chip in.
This could take a while with Raj's internet connection.
One of the downfalls of the whole remote thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't choose everyone's internet for them, can you?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what Raj, I'll just jump in here. So obviously this was our remote onboarding session. So like I said, if anyone's got any questions or anything at the end, then do feel free to jump in. But hopefully you found that useful, along with the original one that we did, and then the final one for this, which we've kind of gone through a bit today, but we're going to have Layla from Mural give a webinar on remote culture and collaboration. So, you know, if it is going to be remote for the long run, how do we make sure that, you know, we keep that camaraderie the same as we would do if we're all together in person? So, but we'll send out details for that, and we'll make sure we get the blueprint sent out to everyone that's attended as well. So,
Thanks to the panel for joining us. And
thank you, panel. Yeah, you've been great. Yeah, been great, and thanks to everyone that's attended. And we hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.